conversations that we've had about it. But it begs the question, how is music connected to well-being? Obviously, that piece was born out of a lot of experience in the composer's life. First experience with his mom. I know you guys watch the vlogs in here. So first experience with his own mom, then his own experience. So, life experience breeds creativity, right? That's where a lot of our creativity comes from. But the connection between mental health and mental well-being and music, when Mr. O'Halley and I spoke about a month ago, I started doing some digging and trying to figure out, what did I want to talk about with you guys. I didn't want to just say, let me describe depression, let me describe things to you that you probably already know what they are. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but I more wanted to do a little more, how does this all connect with music? So more relevant to this class for you. So I want to talk a little bit about mental health. I want to talk a little bit about how the themes that are in this piece connect with the needs that we all have as human beings, that aren't just psychological needs, they are neurologically based. They're not just things that we've learned that we want based on what we've seen around us, but they're things that are born into our systems, and how music connects to that. What does research tell us about how music connects to that, and in what way does it kind of bring it all around full circle? And I'd like to hear your thoughts as we go. Starting with, the big topic of the day, mental health, mental well-being. There has been a shift in mental health treatment over time. Many years ago, decades ago, there was a, label, treat, isolate, hide. It was something that was not talked about very much. It was something that anybody experiencing any kind of mental health symptoms were viewed as, this is going to be chronic, this is treatable only with medication or only with isolation, or there were some really off-the-wall kinds of treatments that have since been put way behind us. But we didn't understand it very much. And when I say we, I mean the community. I wasn't around for that. But we didn't understand it very much. We didn't know what to do if someone was very, very anxious, or if someone was very, very depressed, or more disruptive things, like if somebody was hearing voices, or somebody was harming themselves, or things that were really severe mental health symptoms. Nobody knew what to do. So there was a lot of experimenting with ideas, things that really stigmatized and othered people who experienced mental health symptoms. These were people that were never going to get better, and were kind of isolated off in ways that made it that anybody who was experiencing any kind of symptoms themselves, there was no way that they were going to come forward and say, I really need some support. That was not part of society. We have moved into where support for mental health symptoms is much more available, but over time, decade by decade, we've started to recognize that simply ridding oneself of negative symptoms is not the same thing as being well. How many people in elementary school when you were little, do you remember those books that does something fill your bucket or empty your bucket? Remember where you want to be a bucket filler, not a bucket dipper, where the idea is you're carrying around a bucket and you want it to be full of good things. That wasn't something that was even considered in treatment of mental health symptoms or mental health conditions in the past. It was simply, we want these negative symptoms to disappear. So many times people were over-medicated, they were isolated so that the negative symptoms would go away, but then there was never a focus on the positive. There was never filling their buckets. They weren't walking around thinking about well-being. It was simply, I don't want to be depressed, I don't want to be anxious. Now, fast forward to right now, we look a lot more holistically. Like, we want people to feel well. We want people to have their lives filled with good things that ideally will crowd out the negative. Sometimes we have to do things to help them eliminate those negative symptoms, but we care about a lot more about a balance. It's a much broader perspective on wellness, whereas wellness wasn't really something that was addressed in the past. So there are a lot of things that we would like to see people develop that come in and say they need support. The question really is, where does music fit into this? Is understanding what each person needs, what we all need. We as human organisms, to feel well, need some very basic things. Beyond things like food and water and safety and those kinds of things, we need a sense of connection. A sense of connection is one of those basic things. Now, that doesn't mean that you walk in and you connect to every single person that you meet in school, or that you feel connected to everybody and that you have this big, huge group of friends. That might be that you come to school and you have your few people that you eat with, or your few people that you really look forward to seeing in class, or you have a couple of teachers, or a coach, or somebody that you come in and they're glad to see you. And they smile and they're glad to see you, and they would miss you if you weren't here. That might be connection within your family, some sort of social interaction. Everybody's sitting in this room, practicing music, producing music. There is a connection in this room, even if you're not friends outside of this room. Even if you're only friends with a couple people outside of this room, there is a connectedness in all working on the same project. That's an interaction and a social reciprocity that doesn't occur if you're sitting home in your room over Zoom. It's a little harder, isn't it? You guys as musicians, I think, had to make a lot of adjustments when we weren't in school. But we all need connection. We also all need patterns and predictability. Think about, the last couple of years. Many of our needs, in a very intangible way, were affected our overall well-being. If we need connection and predictability and patterns, think about how a pandemic affects that. All of a sudden, we don't know what's going to happen. We thought we were going to be out of school for 2 weeks, right? We went home. I took a couple things out of my office and went home. I didn't even take most of my belongings because we were going to be back in 2 weeks. A couple years later, it's starting to look and feel a little more normal. But predictability is something that brings us comfort, and we'll talk a little more about that, like neurologically, as we go. But we need movement. If we sit too much and don't move, our system starts to kind of depress a bit. We need movement. There were people with the pandemic, I've spoken to many students who in a year and a half did not leave their house at all. I was an adult, I had to go food shopping. I had to come to work sometimes. I had to get out of the house here and there. Even though there was a pandemic, we needed to go do some things. There were people that didn't leave the house for almost 2 years. That is a major lack of movement, if you will, where you're not getting out and doing the normal, walking down to C Hall and walking back. That's a good amount of movement. There were people who didn't move very much at all or stayed in the room for almost an entire pandemic. That affects well-being in one of those intangible kind of neurological ways that you almost can't verbalize. We need engagement. We need a sense of belonging, a sense of mastery. Are we good at something? You guys are musicians. You may feel like this is your talent and this is like your love and your talent, or you may feel like you're okay at it. Your academics, being a really good friend, maybe you're really good at being an older sibling, feeling like you are good at something that you can look at it and be proud of it, whether it's an English essay, a piece of music that you're playing, an A on your math test, whether it's the lab that you wrote up in science, or whether you're growing a garden at home. Feeling like you're good at something is a need. And independence. Now, I know that in high school, independence is something that you're kind of like fighting and striving for. But independence at your age really means, do you have some sort of impact in your own world? Do you have choices? Do you get to have some say? Do you get to make some decisions about your own life, about the direction that life is going, about choices, about who you spend time with, about what you do with that time, what you do with your energy? Do you have some choices? And generosity is, are you able to share yourself, what you're good at, what you feel proud of? Are you able to share that with other people? So maybe that is sharing music. Maybe that is you're, an athlete and you're one of the older members of the team and you're supporting the younger athletes as they're coming up. Maybe you're supporting younger siblings. Maybe, any different way. Maybe you're contributing in your classes. Maybe you're one of those people that is like really, really good at a certain subject and you answer a lot of questions and you're helping people along in class. There's a lot of different ways that you can share what you are good at with other people in a way that makes you proud. The themes that Mr. Standridge put through this project, this piece, really do reflect a lot of those needs. Either they reflect a lack of one of those needs, where that need is just not present, or they reflect how much we have that need. The first theme is about an individual, his mom, who had pretty severe mental illness and was lost and in this stark place with no help, and then found relief once she went and was hospitalized and got the help she needed. Think about our needs. Think about that need for connection, that need for predictability, that need for mastery, for belonging. This is representing this period of loneliness that shows a real absence of that need being met. Now, mind you, that's something that a lot of times when you're in that period of loneliness, it's very hard to see how to find your way out. That's where sometimes you guys come in as friends, as people that you're seeing. If you're seeing somebody in one of these periods, you might be the person that helps them get back by connecting them with supports that they might need. Any questions or comments before I keep going? That next theme is about the intrusion into your life of mental illness, or even a period of mental illness, or an episode of where life gets really, really, really tough. Sometimes people have a mental illness like a condition. Some people have a loss that it feels like this little period in your life that feels catastrophic and feels really, really difficult, whether that's the loss of a family member, something like the loss of a pet, breaking up with a significant other, having a real conflict with a friend, something that happens in school, if your parent loses their job and you have to move. Those are things that can feel like an episode of what this piece is talking about, where you're feeling lonely and you're feeling like things may not get better and you're feeling like you're in a really bad place. That has a major intrusion on your life, right? That's when you think about disorders like anxiety or depression. What kind of tips them over from being a set of symptoms that's like a normal life up and down, where you're anxious about something or you're really sad about something, into that kind of level of this may need a little bit more support, maybe this is a disorder, is often the level of disruption or intrusion into your life. It's not so much transient, it's something that you feel like is just not improving, kind of lingers for longer. You notice that he weaves hope throughout this piece as well. Notice that sometimes it's very present and sometimes it's buried a little deeper. Has anybody experienced that, where sometimes your hope goes up and down, sometimes it's present, sometimes it's not? That sometimes, I really liked how he did that it was recurring, that sometimes there was hope right before even a major down spot or a violent spot, that there's hope and then there's ups and downs. That is absolutely present. That is something that you guys are going to experience in your lives, where sometimes you feel very hopeful and very optimistic, and sometimes you feel a little more like, how do I get out of this bag? I thought the fourth theme that he had in here that I really thought was very interesting was the theme representing chaos. Did anybody have any thoughts on that before I give you my thoughts on it? You know, that fourth piece where the way that he plays the notes, or the way that he has you guys play the notes, represents chaos. The words that he used were unpredictable, alien, disturbing, where there was no center. It was confusing because the notes don't sound, they aren't put together in a way that sounds melodic, right? They're not put together in a way that sounds like you would expect music to sound. It's kind of like, it sounds off. What do you guys think of that section? Or those, I think it's recurring. So what do you guys think of that? What does that represent for you? Does anybody ever feel that way? Like things just aren't lining up? Things feel chaotic? Things feel unpredictable?
Tough crowd watching.
That's all right. So keeping in mind, I'm going to bring this back to how music is connected to all of this. Remember our needs: connection, predictability, movement, engagement. We need light. You probably have heard you can actually buy UV lamps that are mood boosters. Have you ever heard of those? You know, these awful fluorescent lights that we have no choice but to have here. You can buy the tubes that go in these that are the same wavelengths as sunlight, and they boost your mood.
Oh, I thought that stuff was only for reptiles.
No, it's for humans because there's something called, have you ever heard of seasonal affective disorder? You ever heard of this? You've heard of it? What it means is that there are people that they feel very depressed when the sun shines fewer hours in the day. And that's neurological. That is, the sun actually changes our body chemistry, and it changes what neurotransmitters are released, and it changes our physiology that impacts our mood. So we need light. A lot of this about music has nothing to do with light, but it's one of our important needs. So how does music fit into all of this? Who can tell me what is the autonomic nervous system? This is your like little science lesson. Autonomic nervous system, or health lesson. I don't know. Might learn in health, might learn in science. Mr. Sarno would be very upset right now. Autonomic nervous system regulates involuntary nervous system functions. So breathing, heart rate, sweating, your pupils dilating, all of those kinds of things, your blood pressure. Those are all regulated by your autonomic nervous system, which means it's not in your voluntary control. You're not sitting here reminding yourself to breathe. You're not sitting here reminding yourself to beat your heart, right? Those things occur whether you want them to or not. If you were to try to stop yourself from breathing, you would pass out so that your body will breathe again. So these are things that are outside of your control. Your sympathetic nervous system is, does anybody know what that is? Think fight or flight. So there's some sort of stressor, whether it's a threat, like a real physical stressor, like there's a fire, or there's, you know, a wild animal, or something that is a threat, or there's an intruder in your home, or is it something that feels like a social threat, like, oh my goodness, I forgot about a test. Something that kind of gets, all of a sudden, your heart rate increases, and you feel like there is some sort of threat. So it's your stress response. It changes your breathing. It increases your breathing rate, increases your heart rate. It causes your body to sweat. It causes your digestion to stop, causes your pupils to dilate so you can see more. There are a lot of functions that just happen without you even thinking about it. The parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite, so it brings you back down where you're calm again. So your sympathetic nervous system is your fear response, your stress response, and parasympathetic brings it back down to where your breathing is normal, your heart rate is normal, your body is normal. Those systems were meant to be activated kind of in a come and go kind of way. So something comes up, your stress response allows you to respond quickly with urgency, and then it goes back down to normal so that your normal body functions take place again. The problem comes when that system is overactivated. So you've got chronic stress, or you've got something that is happening all the time that is elevating that stress response. Sometimes that is things that are outside of you, like, maybe the environment that you're in, maybe, the neighborhood that you're in, maybe, family dynamic, maybe a relationship dynamic with friends or a romantic partner or something, or maybe you are taking 5 AP classes, you're doing, an after-school sport, you're doing marching band, you're trying to, work on the weekends, and all of a sudden you are running yourself ragged, and that is your stress response elevates. There are lots of different reasons that can happen. It can have, and I'm sure this doesn't surprise you, it can have well-being consequences where you just don't feel well. You just feel stressed out, you feel overwhelmed. Has anybody here ever felt that before? I have, overwhelmed. It also can lead, because it's all connected, that stress hormone is just being constantly dumped into your system. So it has short-term effects of you just don't feel well. You just don't feel great. Maybe you don't feel sick, but you don't feel well either. You kind of just feel like blah. You feel tired. Sometimes your muscles can feel achy. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and you just don't feel good getting out of bed. Long-term, that stress response being activated and overactivated and reactivated can cause health consequences. You've heard of people that are super stressed out having a heart attack at 40. Like, that is a real thing. You can have bodily consequences for severe stress. Also, that stress system being activated all the time leads to you not being able to think real clearly. Has anybody ever gone in to take a test that you studied for, and you were super nervous about the test, and you couldn't remember the answers? It's happened to me. I can't be the only one. Christina, it happens where you feel super stressed out, and you go in and you forget everything, and then you leave and you go, oh my gosh, I knew that. Like, but I studied that, I knew it. It's because anxiety and a lot of stress interferes with your ability to think. The same is true for the opposite. If your system is completely underactivated and you're physically, clinically depressed, that also interferes with your thinking, because you're not activated. Like, that thinking process is just kind of not activated, and you're feeling super unmotivated all the time. That's very much in your body. That's in your thoughts, but it's very, very much in your body. It's why sometimes it's hard to just kind of like pull yourself out of those experiences, because it's not just your thoughts, it's not just your choices. That's part of the stigma, actually, that we were talking about. This project is trying to destigmatize mental health, and seeking treatment is, it used to be, even pretty recently, well, just do something differently, right? Like, just make a different choice. Go, you don't feel like going to school, well, just go to school. If you don't feel like doing this, just do it. Like, you're worried, you shouldn't worry about that, you'll be fine. Just go. A lot of dismissive kind of comments that take out of context that this is a very bodily experience, that we have to address as such. Any thoughts, questions? So, good news about music is research tells us, because theory is one thing, but research is where this has actually been studied in people, in big numbers of people across many, many settings. Music impacts many of these things and more. When you are anxious or stressed out, a lot of these things aren't going to surprise you. It can lower your heart rate. It can lower your breathing rate. It can lower your blood pressure. It can help with hormone regulation, which is any of the stress hormones that are released into your system. It can help with that. It can measurably see a difference. It can decrease cortisol. Cortisol is one of the chemicals that is pumped into your body as part of the stress response. If that stress response is occurring all the time, your cortisol levels are measurably high. This contributes to depression, it contributes to anxiety, and it contributes to some of those health consequences is an excess of cortisol. Music can actually measurably change that cortisol level. This won't surprise you, it can boost your mood. Anybody's mood ever been boosted by music? It can increase your dopamine levels measurably. Who knows what dopamine is?
Happy chemical.
Happy chemical, very good. What else is dopamine good for? It's a happy chemical. You get reinforced when dopamine is secreted. What else does dopamine do? Helps with motivation. It helps with concentration. It is something that is, our bodies are always seeking to raise our dopamine levels. It is our natural state, is we want to increase those levels because we feel better when those levels are higher. It is a happy chemical, absolutely. There are lots and lots of ways to increase your dopamine. If your dopamine is low, you feel very depressed and unmotivated. Increasing your dopamine levels can be things like exercise, simple conversations with people, watching a movie that you like. Some foods that can increase, like fruits and vegetables, can increase your dopamine levels. Exercise is a huge one, but also engaging with things that you enjoy. Reading a book that makes you laugh, watching a movie that makes you laugh. Something that increases that boosts your mood can boost your dopamine and therefore boost your motivation and boost your productivity. And increase your concentration. So all of those things are things that we have seen in research that music impacts. But why? Why does music impact all of those things? Remember back to those needs, some of the needs that we have as human beings. Connection. What does music have to do with connection? How does music kind of check that connection box? Any ideas? Connection with other people. Connection in general, connection with your environment and with other people. Yeah. So playing with a band, you can build relationships, absolutely. Were you gonna say something? A relationship with your teacher, absolutely. Does anyone ever feel that sense of connection to something that's nostalgic? Like to a TV character or to a piece of music that is familiar and enjoyable to you? Does that ever feel like it kind of sparks a connection? You ever had that feeling? Or even if it reminds you of a connection, of a friendship, of being a kid, of, sometimes nostalgia and the shared experience of music can make you feel connected even when you're by yourself, even when you're in your own room. It can give you a sense of connection. What about predictability and patterns? How does music relate to predictability and patterns? Yeah, parts repeat. Routines with practicing, absolutely. What about music itself? There's parts that repeat, but what about instrumental music? What's that got to do with predictability and patterns? The song has a beat to it, absolutely. So predictability, patterns, and rhythm are things that are built into music, right? They're built into the fabric of music. Have any of you guys ever taken music theory? No? Is that?
A couple, there's other books, a couple.
So music theory, do composers just randomly put notes together and go, oh, that sounds good? Is that how it's composed? Why? Why is it composed in certain patterns? Why is it composed, with a structure? Why is that? You're on the right track. Different sounds together give you a feeling. What if that last note is off? What if a note in a chord is off? Any of you play the guitar or play the piano? What if one of the notes in that chord is wrong? What happens? It sounds weird. It takes you out of that flow of that music. That is something that's not random. It's not, you don't enjoy certain flows of music because you've been taught to enjoy those flows of music. Certain music is moving and flows and is powerful because of the pattern and the way that resonates with human beings. The way it resonates with our neurological system is it goes together in such a way that if a couple of those chords were wrong, it's not just that you've heard it before and it's unfamiliar and you go, wait, that note's wrong. That pattern and that predictability and that structure of the way music goes together, it would sound, what would be the word? Where
Incomplete or dissonant?
there would be dissonance where you can hear, even as a non-musician, such as myself, you can hear that that's wrong. That is something that there's a predictability and a rhythm that goes with music that regulates our neurological system. If you can remember having a bad day, have you ever played music that lifts you up, that makes you feel like you're really glad that you listened to it? You turn on music that helps your mood? Do you go to unfamiliar music or familiar? Familiar. Probably exclusively familiar, because there is comfort in our systems to predictability and patterns and nostalgia and recognition. That is something that that's something that we didn't just make a conscious decision for that. That's something that's built into us because humans like patterns and familiarity and nostalgia and recognition. Anybody babysit or have little siblings, like little tinies? What do you do when a baby cries? How do you soothe that baby? What else? You talk to them. What else? What about when you pick up a baby, right? If they're upset and they're crying, and you pick up a baby, you ever walk with them? What happens if you get a baby crying and you sit down? Makes it worse. Baby cries again. Baby cries worse because that motion has stopped. You know how there's rocking chairs in parents' rooms a lot of times? And have you ever seen babies in swings? And the little bouncy chair that sits like on the table where it rhythmically bounces up and down? Why does that work? Why does that? It's familiar things, but think about that person could be in a completely different setting. So maybe that family's on vacation, and somebody that's babysitting the child picks this little infant up, rocks them, pats them, rubs them on the back, maybe hums to them, maybe talks to them. That works because our neurological system is soothed by movement, rhythm, patterns, predictability. If somebody's sitting in a rocking chair rocking a baby, you're tap, 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 tap in a pattern, and you're rocking, and it's a rhythmic movement that soothes a baby. That baby wasn't taught that. that little teeny tiny infant was born with that pattern of things soothing them. It's like the go-to, rocking, patting, humming, maybe moving, walking. Walking for a baby is rhythmic because they can hear the footsteps. That kind of reverberates through their own body. That is co-regulation that soothes their systems. So, music. It's got all those same pieces, doesn't it? When you turn music on, what do? Not music you're playing. If you turn music on, what do? Turn it up a little bit loud, by yourself in your room. What do? You tap your feet. What else? Maybe nod your head. Maybe, like, some people kind of like move their knee a little bit. Maybe your body moves to the rhythm. What about sometimes you sing? You can admit it. But sometimes you tap your fingers. There's all different things that you might do that your system kind of starts to match that music, doesn't it? Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes. So, what about if you're having one of those bad days where you feel like you really have low energy? What might you do? Put on music that's a little more upbeat. That can bring your system up a little bit, can actually put a little dopamine in your system, lift you up a little bit. What about if you're feeling super anxious? Maybe like bring it down a little bit, right? Our systems regulate to those external stimuli, and that is natural. That is not something that we learned how to do. It's something that, little teeny infants, they put music on, like sleepy time music, and it calms their system. It's the same thing with beach waves, right? Sometimes people's noise machines have waves on them. Sometimes it's rain. Sometimes, what's that? A whale. There are some funny sounds, I know. But if I don't know about you guys, but if I go to the beach, you can hear the waves, and it's not uncommon that I fall asleep. But those kinds of wave patterns that can regulate our system, I'm sure you've all at one point or another experienced your system either being like uplifted or calmed by that external sound. Any thoughts on that? It's the after lunch slump, right? So how would creating music kind of bump that up a little bit? So you go from listening to music that you like, music that's familiar, that you enjoy. What does creating music do? Thinking about those needs. Think connection, predictability, rhythm, movement, engagement. Definitely give you a sense of mastery, especially with the practice, right? Yeah, gives you a sense of mastery. Think about that if you are soothing a baby, there's that kind of rocking, tapping, sound that all kind of regulates and reverberates the nervous system. What if you're a percussionist? What about, is there movement? Reverberation of sound, right? Is there a rhythm and predictability? You're creating the rhythm, right? So that can speak to our systems in a way that even just listening to it doesn't necessarily do as much. You all, no matter what instrument you are playing, there is repetitive movement. You are following a structure and a pattern, whether it's movement of your fingers, whatever that movement is, depending on your instrument, there is repetitive movement. There is something that you get in such a groove. You have this class 3 days a week. My guess is you're playing a lot more than during this class. But that is a repetitive movement kind of system. Think about, go to a different corner. Think about marching band. Are you sitting in the stands playing like slow, sleepy music? Probably not. Why not? You want everybody listening to be upbeat. You want the whole town of Linwood to be upbeat, right? So you're playing upbeat music that's exciting the crowd, that's getting people going, that's getting people on their feet, that that music resonates because it's not necessarily because they've been taught that music resonates. That music is upbeat and uplifting for anybody listening to it. There's also shared experience. So connection, there's a shared experience in creating music. There's a shared experience in a more existential kind of way. There are certain pieces I guarantee you've played that have been played for how long? What are some of the oldest pieces that you played?
Some of them go back to as band literature, probably 1930.
Okay.
Then there's orchestral transcriptions, but yeah.
Yeah, but there's a shared experience that's on a more existential level, that this is familiar music, that people, internationally recognize this music. Then there's a shared experience of everybody being in the same room, and everybody collectively working day after day on producing this music. Then there's a shared experience of sharing your talents on stage when eventually you perform this for other people.
I know when we perform too, or even rehearsing, if you think about it, when there's certain spots we're breathing together and we play together, everyone is pretty much trying to get their system on the same wavelength, for lack of better terms. There's also in choirs and in bands too, there's studies that show that your heartbeats sync up because you are breathing together and playing the same stuff together too. So it's pretty neat what music can do to our well-being.
It also can bypass, remember I said with strong emotions, it can be hard to think clearly. Have you ever been so either distressed or anxious or worried or fearful or sad and, experiencing a major, sad experience that you can't find the right words to share how you're feeling? Music can bypass that. It's part of why we gravitate during very intense emotional times, we gravitate towards maybe familiar music, that maybe it's just familiar pop music that you listen to or sing, or just allow that music to kind of permeate your system. Sometimes it's very, very emotional. We might say, oh, you're having a bad day, why don't you listen to something happy? Well, sometimes that emotional music that sounds like it wouldn't be the best thing to listen to, sometimes it is, because it allows you to express emotion that you can't get the words out to express. Like, you resonate with a message in a song that allows you to bypass that system where you're trying to create and share what it is you feel. It's like, I will let this artist share it for me, but I'm gonna listen to it. It's part of why sometimes we gravitate towards something that almost connects with that feeling that we're feeling that is a negative feeling. But creating music can bypass that need to share in a narrative way with somebody else how you're feeling. A couple things because class is over in a couple minutes. We in wellness, in guidance, in child study team, any of us down here, you can knock on our doors at any time. It can be something small, or something in the grand scheme of life small. You didn't do well on a test, you're really frustrated, you're angry, you're upset at a teacher, you're upset at a coach, you're upset at a parent, you're upset at a sibling. Whatever that thing is that feels like it might be transient and might be short-lived, but feels really awful in that moment, you can come down and talk to us. You're not bothering us, that's what we're here for. If it's longer and bigger and you say, I am feeling this way, I've been feeling this way for years, I don't know what to do, I feel like it's never getting better, I feel like nothing I'm doing is working, we can listen to you for that too. We can either talk with you in school, or we can help connect you with people outside of school. Your information is confidential, meaning if you pop into guidance, I just left guidance, there were like 15 people standing in the lobby of guidance waiting to go to a college fair. There are people in guidance all day, every day. If you happen to knock on my door no one even notices. So I know that there's, sometimes people worry about their information being out there. We don't share information with anybody. If you come and talk to us, unless you ask us to share information or unless we're worried about your safety or someone else's safety, your information is confidential. So whatever you tell us, we can listen. If you need support, we can try and find it for you. But nothing's too big or too small. We are around, and that's what we're here for. We want to provide anything that you guys need. Also, remember that problem solving when you're in a lot of distress. That problem solving isn't so good. If one of your friends is having a real difficult time, you can bring them down. You can send a message to any one of us. You can talk to your teacher. You can talk to whoever you're comfortable with and say, I'm really worried about such and such. They're just not doing well. We can either say, your friend Christina reached out to us. Or we can say, somebody was worried about you. And we do not have to share that information. We would rather check in with somebody, and that is something you can do. You can send us a name of somebody privately, or you can walk them down. But we'll still check in with them because we want you to get what you need. Any questions before the bell rings?
So can we say thank you, Dr. Spagone? Thank you. So remember, as we go through this unit for the Not Alone project, there's resources for you, and also think of it as not something somebody being weak. It's not like that at all, and they're here to help. I'm going to say it too. I went to Dr. Spagone early in the beginning of the year, just to talk to somebody about when I was just getting so overwhelmed with all the work I had to do. Like, I had 40 guitars I had to change every single string for, and there wasn't enough time. And then I had to pick up my son from the bus stop right after school, so I couldn't stay after school to get here. But then I had to take my other son to daycare before school at a certain time, and he couldn't go earlier. So I had no time to do what I needed to do here. So just talking to her for a couple minutes really, I think, helped me get through just a weird spot, and it was really cool. So again, if you need anything, come to me, come to anybody in the wellness team, the guidance team, and we can just be there and a shoulder for you to talk to or cry on or laugh with, whatever you want. Thank you all for being such good listeners, and we'll have more rehearsal tomorrow then. All right, thank you.